How was it going, NPC Nation? Welcome back to a brand new video. This video is going to be, what if feudal Japan never ended? What if the feudal Japan time period never ended? So feudal Japan lasted from the 1100s to 1867. Lasted a long time. And it was basically, there was an emperor, but basically the shogunate was in charge because Japan basically became a militarized country. It was a military run country. If you ran the military, if you had control of the military, you basically had control of Japan. And what if that still existed today? What if the samurai still existed and all that still existed today? Japan has an emperor, but the emperor is not in control still. The emperor isn't in control, the prime minister is. Japan has a prime minister like most, constitutional monarchies do. Just like England has a constitutional monarchy where the king, currently King Charles III, is in charge of just the military, but he isn't in charge of the country. That's the prime minister's job. But what if we had that still today? I think, just like China, Japan eventually would become a civil war. Multiple civil wars. It's feuding dynasties. China had a dynasty, though. Japan had the feudal, empire, basically. The Empire of Japan was feudal. Was the feudal, before that was the feudal Japan, area. I'm trying to say country. The country was feudal Japan before it became the Empire of Japan. And the feudal time period was basically the shogunate was in charge, but they still had an emperor. Eventually, they did have the, war that ended it and ended the reign of the shogunate. The rise of the Ronin. Rise of the Ronin is basically the plot of that is feudal Japan and the end of feudal Japan and the end of the shogunate. What if that still existed? I think eventually it would have ended out. But if it still existed, I think the samurai would overthrow the shogunate and have a militarized. I think Japan would be a militarized country because they would get tired of the shogunate and get tired of the emperor, and eventually just overthrow, and a coup d'état would happen, and we would have an overthrow of Japan, and Japan would be a militarized country. It wouldn't be a feudal Japan, but it'd be a militarized country, and we would have where the military is in charge. And I think that would be the result if feudal Japan was still around. It eventually became the real result. But if we look at that timeline, it was such a weird period in Japanese history, but feudal Japan was such a period in Japanese history that it grew the country to where it's at today. It did become the Empire of Japan afterwards, but Japan is such a history-rich country that's been around for a long time, and a lot of people don't look at that, they don't look at that time period and say, oh, this was amazing. It wasn't. No time period, eventually Japan did get it right, but the time period of feudal Japan did have some sorrowness, and it did have some bad things happen. Every period in the country's history had some bad things happen. And the time it did happen, during that time period when Japan, during the feudal Japan time period, it was, you had some clans, some warring clans and some warring samurai. You had some samurai without masters. You had, the Japanese Civil War, which becomes a different war. You had the British occupation of Japan for a while, the American occupation of Japan, the Black Boats, a lot of that stuff happened. The cholera epidemic. And all that pressure from America to trade with Japan, all that pressure from the British control, and then the British left and the Americans came in. All that pressure from all that factions and stuff like that eventually collapsed the feudal Japan timeline, a period of Japan, and collapsed that period of Japan, and they were like, you know what, we're going into shutting ourselves out now. We're doing that. We're going back to that. You guys forced our hand to shut ourselves. We tried to bring ourselves with the Western world. We tried to trade with the Western world. Didn't work. We're going back to shutting ourselves, in. And then they eventually got stronger and became the empire. But it was a very interesting period. I don't know a lot about Japanese history. I would love to learn more about Japanese history, but Japanese history is very interesting to me. And if feudal Japan never ended, I think eventually we would have had a military coup d'etat, and then there would just be a militarized state where its military would be in control. Unlike today, where they have a prime minister and they still have an emperor, the last emperor, current emperor. But the emperor is like the king of Britain, not really in control of anything. But that is what if feudal Japan still existed. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, press the share button, press the like button, press the red shiny subscribe button, press the bell to stay notified every time I upload a video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.